There's a certain kind of movie magic that only happens once in a generation, and in the summer of 1985, that magic had gull-wing doors and a top-speed problem. Back to the Future turned a stainless steel sports car into the most famous vehicle in science fiction, made 88 miles per hour, a phrase every kid on the planet understood, and gave us a friendship between a teenage skateboarder and a wild-haired inventor that still holds up 4 decades later. Michael J. Fox became a household name as Marty McFly. Christopher Lloyd turned Doc Brown into one of cinema's great eccentrics. And behind the camera, Robert Zemeckis and Bob Gale built a script so tightly constructed that film students still study it today. But the road to Hill Valley was a lot bumpier than most people realize. Before the cameras ever rolled on the version of the film we know, there was a different lead actor, a completely different time machine, a title so bad it almost sank the whole project, and a legal fight that changed how Hollywood treats actors' faces forever. So buckle up, because we're counting down 15 facts about Back to the Future that even longtime fans might not know. If you're new here, hit subscribe, and if you've already got a soft spot for flux capacitors, drop a comment when you spot your favorite fact. Let's get into it. For 6 weeks in late 1984, the role of Marty McFly belonged to a different actor entirely, Eric Stoltz. Zemeckis and Gale had wanted Michael J. Fox from the very beginning, but Fox was tied up filming the sitcom Family Ties, and the show's producers wouldn't let him go. So on the advice of Universal Studio chief, Sid Sheinberg, who'd been impressed by Stoltz's dramatic performance in The Film Mask, the production moved forward with Stoltz instead. The problem showed up almost immediately. Stoltz was a committed method actor who insisted on being called Marty, even off camera, and he brought a heavy, dramatic intensity to a role that was supposed to be light and funny. Bob Gale later told The Guardian that Stoltz wasn't giving us the kind of humor that we thought the character should have, and that Stoltz genuinely interpreted the story as something closer to a tragedy, since Marty ends up losing the family he originally knew. That's a fascinating read on the material, but it's not exactly prom night popcorn entertainment. Behind the scenes, tension built. During a fight scene with Biff, played by Thomas F. Wilson, Stoltz reportedly refused to pull his punches during rehearsals, leaving Wilson bruised. According to cinematographer Dean Cundy, crew members had started noticing the mismatch even before the decision was made official, recalling moments where the production would set up a reaction shot for Christopher Lloyd, but quietly skip the corresponding angle on Stoltz. After roughly a month of dailies that just weren't landing, Zemeckis and the producers made the call. On January 10, 1985, Stoltz was let go, and Michael J. Fox finally came aboard, splitting his days between Family Ties and an overnight Back to the Future shoot, a scheduling arrangement that reportedly cost the production millions of dollars once you factor in the need to reshoot nearly everything Stoltz had already filmed. Zemeckis has since called firing Stoltz one of the hardest moments of his career, describing it in one interview as the worst experience of his professional life, and Fox himself reached out to Stoltz decades later to talk about it, an outreach Stoltz apparently responded to warmly despite declining to participate further. Stoltz, for his part, went on to have a long and respected career, including a memorable role in Pulp Fiction and later work as a television director. But it's genuinely difficult to picture anyone besides Fox skateboarding through the Hill Valley Town Square. And by most accounts, the cast and crew felt the same way the moment Fox stepped onto set. Long before the DeLorean rolled onto the screen, Doc Brown's time machine was something far less glamorous. In the earliest drafts of the script, the device was a stationary laser-powered chamber, and the climax of the film involved Marty climbing into a lead-lined refrigerator that was hauled by truck to a nuclear bomb test site in the Nevada desert. The idea was that the force of the atomic blast, combined with the fridge's protective lining, would send Marty hurtling back through time. It's a wild image, and according to Bob Gale, it was seriously considered for multiple drafts. But Steven Spielberg, serving as executive producer, worried that kids watching the movie might try to climb inside old refrigerators themselves, which was a genuine safety concern at the time, given a string of real accidental deaths involving discarded fridges with latching doors. So the refrigerator idea was scrapped. Interestingly, decades later, Spielberg revived almost the exact same concept for a very different franchise, In Indiana Jones and the Kingdom of the Crystal Skull, Harrison Ford's character survives a nuclear blast by hiding inside a lead-lined refrigerator. Turns out good ideas, even strange ones, don't always disappear. They just wait for the right movie. Once the fridge was out, Zemeckis wanted something mobile instead of a stationary booth, which led the team to a car. And not just any car, the sleek, gull-wing door DeLorean, chosen partly because its futuristic look would read as an alien spacecraft to unsuspecting characters in 1955. Crispin Glover's awkward, endearing performance as George McFly is one of the first film's quiet highlights. But when Back to the Future Part 2 went into production, Glover was gone. According to multiple accounts, Glover had creative objections to the ending of the original film, feeling it rewarded the McFly family with material wealth rather than emotional growth, and he also wanted compensation closer to what Michael J. Fox was earning. The producers weren't willing to meet those terms, and negotiations fell apart. Rather than simply recasting the role in the traditional sense, the production made an unusual choice. They took a face mold that had originally been created for aging makeup during the first film and used it to help transform a different actor, Jeffrey Weissman, into someone who resembled Glover. Combined with careful camera angles, distant shots, and even some reused footage of Glover from the original movie, the filmmakers tried to create the illusion that Glover was still playing the part. Glover was not pleased when he found out, and he sued Universal Pictures for violating his right of publicity. The case never went to trial. Instead, it was settled out of court for a reported $760,000. But the more lasting impact came afterward. The Screen Actors Guild updated its collective bargaining agreement to explicitly prohibit producers from recreating an actor's likeness through prosthetics, old footage, or similar techniques without that actor's consent. That protection has only become more relevant in the age of CGI and AI-generated performances, and Glover's case is still cited today whenever the conversation turns to digital likeness rights. It's hard to imagine now, but the title Back to the Future almost didn't survive development. Sid Sheinberg, the head of Universal at the time, reportedly believed that no film with the word future in its title had ever been a hit, and he pushed for the film to be renamed Spaceman from Pluto, a nod to a comic book briefly glimpsed in the movie when a frightened farmer mistakes Marty, dressed in a radiation suit, for an extraterrestrial. Sheinberg didn't stop there. He also suggested swapping out Doc's dog Einstein for a chimpanzee. Zemeckis and Gale were reportedly rattled by the memo and unsure how to push back against their studio boss without damaging the relationship. So they brought in Steven Spielberg, who was serving as executive producer, to handle it diplomatically. Spielberg sent Sheinberg a note thanking him for his most humorous memo and saying everyone got a good laugh out of it, essentially treating a serious suggestion as an obvious joke. Sheinberg, apparently too embarrassed to insist he'd meant it, dropped the idea entirely. Back to the Future kept its name. Einstein stayed a dog, and one very tactful memo may have saved the movie's identity. On screen, the DeLorean DMC-12 looks like something built to break the sound barrier. In reality, it was famously underpowered. The production version of the car used a roughly 130 horsepower V6 engine and needed somewhere around 9 to 10.5 seconds just to go from 0 to 60 miles per hour, according to period road tests from outlets like Road and Track and Car and Driver. Hitting 88 miles an hour, the speed required to activate the time machine in the film, would have taken a long stretch of open road and a fair amount of patience in real life. What the DeLorean lacked in raw performance, though, it more than made up for in looks, with its brushed stainless steel body and dramatic gull-wing doors, giving it a genuinely futuristic silhouette that suited the film's tone perfectly. The car's real-world story is almost as dramatic as the movie. The DeLorean Motor Company had already gone bankrupt years before the film's release, and John DeLorean himself was famously moved by the film. According to Bob Gale, DeLorean personally wrote to the filmmakers after a screening, saying he was pleased his car had been immortalized on screen. It's a strange kind of happy ending for a company and a car that had, by any conventional business measure, already failed. The instantly recognizable courthouse square, where the DeLorean leaves its famous fiery tire tracks, isn't a real town at all. It's a permanent set on the Universal Studios backlit in California, and by the time Back to the Future filmed there, it had already had a long career under other names. The location previously stood in for the small Alabama town in To Kill a Mockingbird, and it later doubled as Kingston Falls in the horror comedy Gremlins, released a year before Back to the Future. Over the years, it also showed up repeatedly in television productions of the era. The set has weathered real disasters as well, having survived at least 2 major fires over the decades that required significant rebuilding, which is part of why sharp-eyed fans sometimes notice subtle differences in the buildings across different eras of film and television. Despite all that, the Courthouse Clock Tower remains a centerpiece of the Universal Studios tour today, where visitors can walk the same square where Marty McFly's story reached its climax, snap a photo next to a full-size DeLorean replica, and imagine those famous flaming tire tracks stretching out across the pavement in front of them. One of the film's sharpest running jokes involves Doc Brown's disbelief that a former Hollywood actor could ever become president of the United States. It's a funny bit today, but at the time, it was a direct reference to a sitting president who had, in fact, been a professional actor. Zemeckis and Gale reportedly worried the joke could backfire badly if Reagan himself ever saw it. As it turned out, they had nothing to worry about. According to accounts from White House staff, Back to the Future was screened privately for Reagan, and he was so amused by the exchange between Doc and Marty that he had the projectionist rewind the film so he could watch the scene a second time. Reagan liked the movie enough that he quoted a line from it in his 1986 State of the Union address, telling Congress, as they said in the film Back to the Future, "Where we're going, we don't need roads." There was reportedly one slightly less comfortable moment during the private screening, when Doc's joking suggestion that Reagan's ex-wife Jane Wyman must be the First Lady landed with noticeably less enthusiasm in the room. The Enchantment Under the Sea dance scene, where Marty accidentally invents rock and roll with a blistering performance of Johnny B. Good, remains one of the most electric moments in 1980s cinema. To make the performance believable, Fox worked closely with Hollywood guitar coach Paul Hansen to nail the finger positions and chord changes well enough that he confidently told Zemeckis he could be filmed playing at any moment without needing to cut away. He also trained with choreographer Brad Jeffries, who based Marty's rock star moves on legends like Chuck Berry, Pete Townsend, and Jimi Hendrix. Here's the twist. Despite all that preparation, the audio in the finished film isn't Fox at all. The guitar work was actually performed by musician Tim May, while the vocals were provided by Mark Campbell, a member of the band Jack Mack and The Heart Attack. Campbell wasn't even credited on the film, though music supervisor Bones Howe reportedly arranged for him to receive a small percentage of soundtrack royalties as compensation. Fox's physical performance was so convincing that plenty of audiences at the time genuinely believed he was playing and singing live. After Back to the Future scored exceptional marks during test screenings in May of 1985, Universal made an aggressive decision. Instead of releasing the film in August as originally planned, they moved it up to July 3rd to capture the lucrative 4th of July box office window. It was a smart marketing call, but it compressed the post-production schedule significantly, cutting the time available for finishing the film's complex visual effects sequences. The crew worked at a breakneck pace to hit the new deadline, and the gamble paid off in a big way. Back to the Future opened to strong reviews and became the highest-grossing film of 1985 worldwide, pulling in more than $380 million at the box office. It's a reminder that sometimes the tightest deadlines produce the results audiences remember most fondly, even if the people making the movie were running on fumes to get there. Before it became a cultural phenomenon, Back to the Future was, by most accounts, rejected more than 40 times. Bob Gale and Robert Zemeckis began developing the concept back in 1980, and for years they couldn't find a studio willing to make it. Disney reportedly passed in part because of the plot thread, where Marty's teenage mother develops a crush on him without realizing he's her future son, even though the story resolves without anything actually happening. One Disney executive reportedly found the premise too risque for the studio's brand. Ironically, other studios rejected the script for the opposite reason. The early 1980s were dominated by raunchy teen comedies, and executives felt Back to the Future was too clean and family-friendly to compete in that marketplace. The project only found real momentum after Zemeckis had a hit with Romancing the Stone in 1984, which made him a more bankable director in the eyes of studios. Universal finally greenlit the film, with Steven Spielberg signing on as executive producer through his production company. What multiple studios saw as a weakness, the film's wholesome, family-friendly tone, turned out to be exactly what set it apart. Thomas F. Wilson brought so much to the character of Biff Tannen that some of his most memorable moments were entirely his own invention. The character's signature mangled expression, where he butchers the phrase, "make like a tree and leave," is widely reported to have come from Wilson's own improvisation on set, along with his use of the word "butthead" as an all-purpose insult. Both lines became genuinely iconic parts of 1980s pop culture, largely because they captured Biff's blustering, dim-witted confidence so perfectly. The joke got an even better payoff years later in Back to the Future Part 2, when an older version of Biff travels back to 1955 and hears his younger self mangle the exact same phrase. This time, older Biff corrects him, snapping that he sounds like a fool for saying it wrong. It's a callback that makes the trilogy feel meticulously planned from the start, even though the original line that sparked it all was never actually written into the script. The origin story behind Back to the Future is surprisingly personal. In the summer of 1980, screenwriter Bob Gale was visiting his parents in St. Louis when a local flood forced the family to dig through their basement, salvaging what they could. Among the water-damaged belongings, Gale found his father's high school yearbook from 1940, something he had never seen before. Flipping through it, he discovered that his dad had actually been president of his graduating class, a fact that genuinely surprised him given his own lukewarm opinion of his own high school's class president. That single realization sparked a question. Would he have actually been friends with his father if they'd been the same age and gone to high school together? Gale brought the idea back to Robert Zemeckis, who loved it immediately and added a crucial twist of his own, imagining a mother figure who'd always claimed to be a good girl in high school but might not have actually been one. From that combination of ideas, the two writers built a story about time travel that was really about family, identity, and the strange discovery that your parents were once young, awkward people navigating the same uncertainties you are. When the filmmakers approached Huey Lewis and the news about contributing a song, Lewis reportedly had reservations. He'd never written music specifically for a film before and wasn't sure what that process would even look like. And by some accounts he initially assumed the project was aimed primarily at kids, which didn't necessarily fit where the band wanted to take their sound at the time. Rather than asking for a title track built around the words "Back to the Future," the filmmaking team simply asked for whatever song the band wrote next, largely because Marty McFly's character was written as a Huey Lewis fan, with the band's music featured in the film's opening scene. Score composer Alan Silvestri is credited with first suggesting Lewis to the production. What Lewis and his band eventually delivered was "The Power of Love," a song with lyrics about emotional resilience that had nothing literally to do with time travel but fit the film's energy perfectly. The song became a massive hit, reaching #1 on the Billboard Hot 100 and earning an Academy Award nomination. As a fun bonus, Lewis also makes a memorable on-screen cameo as one of the judges at the school's Battle of the Bands audition, the one who famously tells Marty's band they're just too darn loud. Unlike most Hollywood franchises, which tend to get rebooted every couple of decades, whether fans ask for it or not, Back to the Future has remained untouched since 1990. That's largely by design. When Zemeckis and Gale signed their original deal with Universal and Amblin Entertainment back in 1984, they reportedly secured contractual approval rights over any future sequels or remakes, meaning nothing new can move forward without their explicit sign-off, for as long as they're both alive. Both writers have been public about their reasoning. They feel the trilogy already tells a complete story, and Michael J. Fox's diagnosis with Parkinson's disease means he's no longer able to reprise the physical role of Marty McFly, which both men have said makes any new version feel fundamentally wrong to pursue. Universal has reportedly floated new offers over the years, but the answer has consistently been no. The one notable exception is the stage musical adaptation, which allowed the story to live on in a new format without altering the original films. For now, at least, Back to the Future remains one of the rare modern franchises still exactly as its creators intended it. Christopher Lloyd stands well over 6 feet tall, while Michael J. Fox is considerably shorter, and that gap created genuine framing challenges whenever the two actors shared a scene. To solve the problem, without relying on camera tricks, Lloyd began hunching forward and stooping his posture so both actors could comfortably fit into the same shot. What started as a purely technical solution became one of the character's defining physical traits. That restless, forward-leaning posture gave Doc Brown a jittery, high-energy presence, almost as if his mind was constantly racing ahead of his body. Lloyd built the rest of the character's look around two real-life inspirations, physicist Albert Einstein and the flamboyant conductor Leopold Stokowski, whose wild white hair Lloyd had admired on an old record album cover. Between the posture, the hair, and Lloyd's famously unpredictable energy on set, Doc Brown became one of the most recognizable characters in film history, all starting from a simple attempt to fit two actors into the same camera frame. And there you have it. 15 facts about Back to the Future that prove even the most beloved movies have some genuinely strange stories hiding behind the scenes. From a nearly nuked refrigerator to a lawsuit that reshaped actors' rights in Hollywood, this film's production was almost as eventful as anything that happened inside Doc Brown's DeLorean. Which fact surprised you the most? Let us know in the comments. And if you enjoyed this trip back to Hill Valley, hit like, subscribe, and share it with someone who still says, "Great Scott," unironically. Until next time.